So next up, we have one of my all-time favorites, and honestly, I didn't suggest we watch this. I just saw it on the spreadsheet, so don't blame me when it gets weird. Ingmar Bergman's lone horror film, Hour the Wolf. Bergman's probably best known as kind of a caricature, tortured mid-century Scandinavian existential chamber dramatist, sharing his time both yelling at an absent god while flagellating himself over how poorly he treats all the women in his life. Bergman's one of the iconic figures of the so-called high modernist art cinema movement that exploded in the late 1950s. The movement got a lot of steam in the US, surprisingly, actually just up the highway in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a cinema now called the Brattle Theater, which led to the creation of what is now the Criterion Collection home media company. It was timed perfectly. First, Europe and Japan were rebuilding their film industries following the war, and they shifted the ratio of films they were importing, typically from the US, to what they were exporting. Second, in the US, the Supreme Court ruled that movie studios, who had owned all the cinemas you would actually be able to go to, had to divest from exhibition, so they had to sell their theaters. Suddenly, there were empty cinemas and an influx of new, non-American films to be seen. Bergman first blew up the international art cinema scene with a set of scandalous, very capital E European films about sex and coming of age or whatever. And they dared show nudity, which, made everyone very excited, because you couldn't get that in American films. Then in the late 1950s, he suffered a crisis of faith and started making these incredibly dour dirges about how God is not only not real, but he probably hates us all, and also there's nuclear war, and maybe your partner secretly hates you even though they smile while they eat breakfast. Hour the Wolf, which we'll be watching today, is one of the first of his films set on a Swedish island in the Baltic Sea that would eventually become his home, Faro. Most of 60s films are set on this island, timed perfectly for his seeming desire to get out of urban modernity and live amongst the elements. In Hour the Wolf, Max von Sydow's Johann Borg, who's a stand-in for Bergman, moves to an island with his wife Alma, played by the great Liv Ullmann, who had just entered a relationship with Bergman at the time, so you can see where this is going. Johann wants to escape the hubbub in order to focus on his art, but he quickly ends up in a nightmare world, like his own subconscious suddenly coming to life around him, and things, of course, start to get out of hand. Hour the Wolf is often called Bergman's lone horror film, but that doesn't exactly seem right, as all of his movies are horrifying in a particular way. Nevertheless, this is one of the few times Bergman actually deploys horror film tropes and aesthetics on the screen. The final segment still kind of messes me up. Just don't expect the same pacing or kinds of scares that externalize the horror rather than look deep inside. If anything, we can probably all relate to Johann and Alma in one way, locked into our own Faroe Islands, maybe staying up until the 4 a.m. hour of the wolf. I'm not seeing visions of otherworldly nightmare creatures yet, but I am supposed to be finishing my dissertation, so maybe it's only a matter of time. I hear there's a boat leaving the island soon. So with that, enjoy Hour the Wolf, and maybe watch some cartoons once it's over.